I have never done speed dating before.
Yes. So just do that when you walk in tonight.
What's your love language?
My love language is physical touch.
Today we're going to explore a theory so incendiary, so disturbing, that if it contains even a fraction of truth, it would totally redefine everything we believed about the Brown family collapse. I want to make something absolutely clear right from the beginning. What we're about to discuss is not confirmed fact. This is a build-up, constructed from insider rumors, observations by attorneys who've privately tracked this family for decades, and an unproven yet unsettling story that's been taking shape behind the scenes for almost 10 years. It's a what-if story, but one in which the pieces fit together with such uncanny exactness that it's less speculative and more like an epiphany.
Healing with Meri, I would love healing with Janelle, I would love healing with Christine.
So settle in. Grab your coffee, your tea, whatever you're sipping, and prepare yourself. Because today we're unpacking what may be the most shocking concept ever tied to sister wives, the bombshell theory of Meri Brown versus Kody and Robyn Brown, a lawsuit that, if filed, could turn the family's story upside down. Now, you'll remember Kody's words during that infamous moment. He attempted to sweep the divorce aside, stating, "It's about the kids. This is just a piece of paper." And then Robyn, sobbing profusely, assured everyone, proclaiming,
Her name is Robyn, and she would never let me do anything naughty. As bad as I want to do it.
"It doesn't change anything in our family. Meri is still his wife." She vowed Meri's action was heroic, an unselfish deed to provide for Robyn's 3 children, Dayton, Aurora, and Brianna. Meri was assured she was doing it out of loyalty, that it was evidence of her commitment to the family, but then this theory turns black. Almost a decade on, insiders indicate that what Meri thought was a sacrifice was probably not that after all. Instead, it could have been the start of something calculated, a conspiracy perhaps, where the divorce was not so much about love of children, but about depriving Meri of power, access, and control. Shocking, isn't it? The notion that what was presented as loyalty might, upon reflection, be realigned as betrayal. And if that's the case, if Meri were to pursue this to court, it wouldn't just be reality TV theatrics anymore. It would be the tale of a woman who says she was tricked into relinquishing her rightful authority under false disguise. Let's go through it step by step, shall we? Because in order to get a handle on the magnitude of this theory, we must return. Not only back to 2014 when the divorce papers were signed, but to the beginnings of this family when Meri wasn't merely a wife, she was the wife, the legal wife, the original woman to marry Kody Brown. She was not merely his girlfriend, she was the matriarch who welcomed him into plural marriage.
I already passed soon.
This is bull. I'm not selling this land until everything is perfectly fair and we do this the right way. Sorry.
It's a standoff at the Coyote Pass.
She was the first to stretch out her hand to greet Janelle and Christine as members of the family. For 24 years, that role held actual power. It wasn't ceremonial, it was practical, fiscal, and binding. Meri's name went on deeds, bank accounts, and business filings. She co-signed mortgages. She had legal standing in a family that operated roughly like a corporation. She was, in every sense of the term, the first stakeholder in what we might refer to as the Brown family enterprise. And then there was Robyn. With Robyn brought a fresh dynamic, and soon, a life-changing ask. Kody wished to adopt Robyn's kids from her first marriage. It sounded lovely at the surface. Selfless, a means of ensuring their future and having them legally remain part of the family forever, no matter what. But there was a catch. The law in their home state wouldn't permit him to adopt without being legally married to Robyn. And he couldn't be legally married to Robyn unless he divorced Meri. That leaves us back with one of the most memorable moments in Sister Wives history, the couch moment. Tears streaming, vows uttered, tension heavy in the air. But peel away the reality TV hype and look at it through legal eyes, and that moment no longer resembles a family meeting so much as Exhibit A in a case. Picture Meri's, lawyers spelling it out in court. They'd refer to it as the genesis of the scam. For on that couch, we witnessed 3 acts unfold. Kody, the patriarch, positioned the divorce as merely a form, dramatizing the emotional while minimizing the legal. That's step 1 in any scam. Reduce the risk, increase the emotion. Then Robyn stepped in as the co-star. Her tears flowed as she reassured Meri. "I didn't ask for this. You'll always be the first wife," she insisted, casting the change as purely symbolic, a gesture with no lasting consequence. Her role was to reinforce the illusion, to strengthen the facade, to soothe Meri into believing this sacrifice wasn't truly a loss. And then there was Meri, the target. She wasn't celebrating. She was bereft. Her tears weren't tears of joy, but of sadness. She was losing something deep. 24 years of legal identity, wiped out with a stroke of the pen. She trusted what she was being told, that her status wouldn't be affected, that this was merely a formality, that her function would be left intact. She did it for them because she trusted their assurances. This, as the theory goes, is the actual meat of a possible lawsuit. Because what Meri lost wasn't merely symbolic. It was legal, financial, binding. And the promises that made her agree to it? Those could very well be the basis for a case of fraud. Legal analysts would term it fraudulent misrepresentation, a knowingly false statement to induce another into agreement. The claim would be that Kody and Robyn knew precisely what the divorce entailed, but spun it as harmless for Meri to assent. And then there is promissory estoppel, a rule of law that states if you make a promise and you rely on it to your prejudice, they are liable when they subsequently breach it. And what about Meri's case? It would depend on establishing that those tearful promises, that her position wouldn't be altered, that her voice would continue to count, that access to family wealth wouldn't be touched, were promises broken from the instant the ink dried on the divorce documents. Because here's the question we all have to pose. What transpired after the documents were signed and Kody was contractually obligated to Robyn? Did anything remain the same? Was Meri still being treated like the matriarch, as the equal partner she was assured she would be? Certainly not. We watched it happen right before our eyes. Gradually at first, then suddenly, Meri's place fell apart. Communion with Kody broke down. Family decisions, at least formerly presented as group matters, began to be made behind closed doors by Kody and Robyn. Meri's strong voice gradually dwindled down to a whisper, an echo, and finally nothing. And when the catfishing scandal erupted, in 2015, it was the ideal scapegoat. For years, Kody blamed it for their marriage's demise. It was Meri's betrayal, he claimed, that broke their trust. But what if that wasn't the reason in the first place? What if it was merely the convenient cover-up story, an excuse to conceal the fact that Meri's marginalization had already started the moment she signed those documents? Consider this. Kody employed the scandal as a shield. Whenever anyone criticized his cruelty toward Meri, he redirected, "She betrayed me. She destroyed the marriage." It was a neat story that made Meri the villain and Kody the hurt victim. But under this theory, the emotional drama was merely the smokescreen. The true story, the quieter one in the background, was financial. This is where the lawsuit turns most biting, from passion and promises to hard, cold cash. Because the Brown family was not only love and religion, it was also assets, years worth of them. Houses, businesses, bank accounts, investments, all knotted in the entwined life they shared. Imagine it. Meri's lawyer, smart and tough, standing in court before the judge. She continues, "Your Honor, the world was read a tale of betrayal and heartbreak. But this case is not about feelings. It's about money. We will prove that Mr. and Mrs. Brown schemed a plot not only to shatter our client's heart, but to annihilate her 24-year investment in this family. The tears on that couch were not about love. They were the cover for a coup of the financial kind. And the proof? It would be to show that as soon as Kody and Robyn were legally wedded, the money changed. The Browns had previously operated what they called a family bank, a communal fund where income went in and spending went out. It was shady, sure, but Meri, being legal wife, had some safeguards. She co-signed loans. Her name was on accounts. She had a say in the empire legally. But post-divorce, the protections vanished. And that, by this gripping theory, is where the actual betrayal started. The theory goes on with a chilling twist. Meri was made to think that even after signing over her legal marriage, nothing would differ. Why wouldn't she believe it? For Kody and Robyn kept telling her over and over again. It was just a piece of paper. The family, they guaranteed, would still be together. The money pot, the infamous family bank, would still function as it had always done. But here then is the first smoking gun, by this theory, the initial crack in the foundation. And in our hypothetical courtroom, this is where Meri's lawyers would deploy Exhibit A, the financial shift. Imagine the scene. Forensic accountant David Chen is called to the stand. He's not teary, not sensational. He's a number guy. He doesn't tell tales. He works with facts. He tweaks his glasses, spreads open a pile of financial reports, and starts his testimony. Your Honor, he begins, we reviewed the Brown family's financial history between 2013 and 2016. Prior to the legal separation in September of 2014, we found a recurring pattern. Major family funds were held in a joint business account under the names Kody Brown and Meri Brown. We'll refer to this as the Family Prime account. Mrs. Brown had full and unrestricted access. This was the account used for down payments on the Las Vegas homes, for covering family business expenses, and for large-scale financial transfers. He pauses, letting the stability of that arrangement sink in. Then he drops the gut punch. But on December 5th, 2014, less than 3 weeks after Mr. Brown legally married Robyn, the account was shut down. All the money, a 6-figure balance, was transferred into a newly opened account. The new account, in the name of K&R Family Enterprises, an LLC formed that same week. The only names attached with full authority, Kody Brown and Robyn Brown. Boom! In an instant, the collective money, the safety net Meri had shared co-managed for decades, was transferred to an account that cut her out altogether. It was the first irreversible step toward taking away her economic authority. But under this theory, it did not end there. Over the course of 18 months, the accountant would testify, a deliberate redirection of household income occurred. What had been a collective pool of money gradually morphed into a financial system run by Kody and Robyn alone. TLC paycheck money, profits from My Sister Wife's Closet, and other household-based gains were diverted away from the group and into accounts Meri could not see, over which she had no control, no say, and yet her expectations didn't shift. Meri was still making a contribution. She was still making the big mortgage on her house in Las Vegas, still covering half of family expenses. But her role changed in financial terms from partner to tenant, from co-proprietor to employee, contributing in, but with no say, no input, no interest. Meri's lawyers, in this hypothesis, would make it stick. They told her nothing would be different, but the first thing they did was freeze her accounts, shut her out, and pool all her money into their own hands. Is that what just a piece of paper looks like? Or is it the deliberate start of a financial coup? It's a strong defense. But Kody and Robyn's defense wouldn't remain silent either. They'd have their own story. Their attorneys would probably claim, "Your Honor, this wasn't about betrayal. This was about pragmatism." Following his legal marriage to Robyn, Mr. Brown became financially on the hook for Robyn and her 3 kids, on top of his and Meri's single child. It made sense to merge finances. There was no ill will here, just good fiscal management. And then, of course, the defense would bring up the infamous catfishing scandal. They would paint Meri as unstable, untrustworthy, a liability to the family's financial health. They'd claim that her own mistakes justified separating her from financial control. But that's where Meri's team would counter. They would say that the timeline is different. The financial restructuring already started before the catfishing scandal was even a known entity. Kody and Robyn already had long since started setting the stage to remove her before Meri's personal demons hit the public eye. The scandal wasn't the reason. It was the excuse. This financial evidence is the foundation of the case. But what follows makes this purported scheme much more personal, much more destructive. Because it wasn't just about money, it was about land, about the Brown family's so-called promised land, Coyote Pass. We all recall it. The Browns replanted their existence in Las Vegas and relocated to Flagstaff in 2018, spending an unprecedented $820,000 on the expansive property they envisioned as home. It was to be a family fantasy. 1 husband, 4 wives, all constructing homes together. Joined, equal, devoted, and Meri fulfilled her role. She sold her Las Vegas house. Her house, the one she had invested money and time into, that equity went into the family trust, now in Kody and Robyn's hands. She paid in because she felt like she was still investing in the common dream. She worked for her piece of land. We all watched the maps on Sister Wives. Meri had her share, the one nested among the trees, the package she had selected. But as any buyer of property can tell you, maps don't do much without deeds. And here's where we encounter Exhibit B, the refinancing plot. In accordance with insider rumors, when Brown started having a tough time managing their new mortgages and land payments in Flagstaff, Kody and Robyn refinanced their enormous $1 million house. On the surface, refinancing is not questionable. It's a common practice to alleviate debt burden. However, what's important here is how they did it. In order to get the best loan, they used the family's main asset, Coyote Pass, land that all of the wives had put money into, land purchased with family money, including Meri's. But when the new papers were written and filed, something astonishing transpired. Kody was listed as the sole owner, and the sole co-owner on the crucial parcel, the one for which the majority of the loan was secured, was Robyn Brown herself. Meri's name? Nowhere to be found. Janelle's and Christine's names were listed on the smaller deeds for secondary parcels, but the financial foundation of the land, the central piece of property, was now legally bound to only Kody and Robyn. Meri's 24 years of investment in the family erased from the record. Meri's lawyers would say this was the ultimate betrayal, the bait and switch perfected. She was convinced to give up her legal status on the promise that her financial investment would be protected, only to find years later that those same assurances had been turned on her. They spent her money, her loyalty, her sacrifices to buy the land, and then used that land to take out loans, shutting her out of ownership. She wasn't an owner. She wasn't a stakeholder. Legally, she was a tenant in the empire she was helping to finance. And the worst part? Under this theory, she didn't even know. She wasn't consulted. She didn't sign. She only found out later, when she was researching her own financials in anticipation of her eventual leaving the family. The stomach punch of discovering that not only were you emotionally abandoned, but financially erased, quietly, intentionally, over years. That revelation, insiders claim, was the tipping point. The instant Meri understood that the piece of paper she signed in 2014 wasn't merely a divorce decree. It was, unbeknownst to her, her signature on her own eviction notice. And that, crew, is when she supposedly made up her mind to strike back. Not because of love, not because of attention from Kody, but because of justice, because of restitution, because of financial dignity she felt had been swindled in the name of family togetherness. The drama was set for a courtroom war that would destroy the image carefully constructed by the Brown family. A case so incendiary that although Meri's lawyers, the high-powered firm of Vance and Sterling, would strive to stay out of spectacle, there was no way to prevent the world from paying attention. Because this wasn't about polygamy anymore. This was about fraud, betrayal, and the destruction of a family dynasty. Eleanor Vance's tone softened as she moved in closer to the witness stand. Ms. Brown, when Kody and Robyn approached you with this offer, what did they offer you? Meri sat up in her chair. Throughout most of her testimony, she had been collected, accurate, almost unemotional, but now her hands shook a little on the wooden railing. They promised me. They swore to me that nothing would change. She broke on the word, swore. She swallowed hard, pushing on. Kody stared at me and told me, "You will always be my first wife. This is just for the kids. It's a piece of paper." And Robyn, Meri looked down, composing herself. Robyn took my hand. She wept. She promised she would never let this tear our family apart, that our family was sacred. She hesitated, her eyes welling for the first time since she'd gotten up to take the stand. I believed them. The courtroom was still, no sound of papers shuffling, no cough from the audience. Only the thud of 30 years of trust shattering into a single sentence. Sharp & Associates pounced on the moment. Kody's lawyer, a tall figure in a gray suit, hurried to the podium with dramatic fervor. Mrs. Brown, isn't it a fact that at this very time you were involved in a long-distance, internet romance with a man who you thought was a completely different man? A romance that embarrassed this family on national television? Meri didn't blink. Yes, she acknowledged matter-of-factly. And isn't it a fact that this alleged betrayal is the actual reason you are here today? Not money, not agreements, but revenge? Meri met the lawyer's gaze. Then, in the same firm voice she had employed to lead the jury through 3 decades of economic sacrifice, she answered, "No, I'm here because I was deceived, because I kept my commitment, and they didn't." It was a crushing rejoinder, brief, biting, unanswerable. Even the judge permitted the silence to hang before at last calling the next recess. Meri's voice broke as she gazed straight at the jury, tears uncontrolled. I believed them, Vance. If I had been told the truth, if they had explained they were going to close my accounts, rewrite the agreements, and strike my name from all the family deeds, I would never have signed the documents. Never. Not a small. Million years. She halted, swallowing thickly, her anguish raw and irrepressible. They asked me to make a sacrifice, and I provided it to them open-heartedly. I did not know I was donating everything I had worked for. I did not know I was funding my own exile. It was the emotional turning point of the trial, the moment at which Meri's narrative shifted from numbers and forms to the ugly truth of betrayal. Her testimony forged the cool graphs of the bean counters with the blood and guts damage of a shattered promise. It wasn't merely a case of money any longer. It was an ethical reckoning. Then came the closing arguments. Kody's and Robyn's attorney addressed the jury, his voice bordering on fatigue, as if he'd witnessed cases such as this 1,000 times. This is not fraud, members of the jury. It's heartbreak. A marriage failed, and along with it came the inevitable splitting of assets. Nothing nefarious, nothing thought out, just the miserable end to a marriage. My client's former wife would have you think this was some grand conspiracy, a Hollywood thriller kind of plot. But the reality is far more mundane. Love passed away, trust was shattered, and she's looking for someone to blame. That's not fraud, that's life. And then arrived Meri's lawyer, Eleanor Vance, with the last word for the plaintiff. She walked to a vast screen demanding the jury's notice. With a click, 2 photos materialized. Side by side, the recognizable 2014 photo of Kody, Meri, and Robyn snuggled up together on the couch, one big happy family. Side by side, a black and white reproduction of the Coyote Pass refinancing deed with only Kody and Robyn's names. Eleanor's voice was like fire. The defense would have you understand this case as a broken heart. But look, and then really look, this is not about a broken heart. This is about a broken promise, a wanton, calculated betrayal carried out on paper, in ink with signatures. Kody and Robyn Brown did not simply stop loving Meri. They stripped her, document by document, piece by piece. They disassembled her legacy, her rights, and her position in this family. They waved love for the children in front of them as the bait, and after signing, they took those documents and used them both as a weapon and a shield. A weapon to take over, a shield to cover themselves with when she questioned why she had been erased. This, ladies and gentlemen, is not divorce. This is a heist, and we are requesting that you compel them to give back what was taken. The jury was dismissed. The wait dragged on. Days of painful silence. News channels played breathless. Reports. Analysts pondered endlessly. For Kody and Robyn, everything rested on the balance. Their wealth, their reputation, even the legend of their family. For Meri, this was something more. This was her one last hope to have her truth accepted, to be heard after 10 years of silence. When the jury did come back, the courtroom was full to capacity. Tension crackled through the room like static. Kody was stiff, Robyn white-knuckling his arm. Meri sat poised, her shoulders straight, her face serene, but her hands shook in her lap. The forewoman, a middle-aged female who had observed each moment with sharp eyes, rose and unfolded the verdict. Her voice was firm. On the charge of fraudulent misrepresentation, we find in favor of the plaintiff, Meri Brown. On the charge of promissory estoppel, we find in favor of the plaintiff, Meri Brown. A clean sweep. Every count, every charge. The jury had found her guilty. They had observed the subterfuge for what it was. Then came the sentencing. Meri's lawyers had enumerated the figures. Lost equity in the Las Vegas properties, the Coyote, past land, and the missing income from joint ventures. The total they requested ran into the millions. After a short recess, the judge re-entered gravely and measured. His words would ring out in headlines nationwide. This court has respectfully examined the jury's verdict and the evidence introduced. It is apparent that Kody and Robyn Brown participated in a protracted course of deception. They made clear assurances to Meri Brown with the aim of inducing her to take lawful action that was profoundly detrimental to her financial and legal interests. The judge swiveled, his eyes fastened on Kody and Robyn. His tone was one of judgment. Although this court does not judge questions of belief or spirituality of faith, it does judge the sacredness of promise. And here we have the worst bait and switch, a plea of adoption wrapped in love, utilized as the crowbar to blow open a financial coup. The plaintiff was not dealt with as a partner. She was dealt with as an obstacle. This court, therefore, directs Kody and Robyn Brown to pay Meri Brown damages totaling $400,000. It wasn't millions, but it didn't have to be. The amount was secondary to the words fraudulent misrepresentation, bait and switch, financial coup. Meri had been vindicated, her story given legal recognition. The backlash was swift and vicious. For Robyn and Kody, their finely honed reputation lay in shambles. People who had long suspected underhandedness finally had proof, stamped by a court of law. Robyn's massive Flagstaff mansion, the one she had argued was needed for her tender-aged children, would now have to be put on the market. Batches of Coyote Pass, the land they had bullied to take, might have to be sold just to cover Meri. The irony was staggering. For the other wives, the ruling came as an earthquake. Christine, who was already out, would interpret it as absolute confirmation she had made the correct choice. Janelle, who remained bound by financial ties, would finally receive the prod she needed to cut her strings once and for all. The mauling was not Meri's triumph alone. It was the coup de grace to the Brown family empire. And Meri, she didn't exit the courthouse in a blaze of glory or rhetoric. No sobbing, no cameras, no drama. She walked out in dignified, measured silence. She'd stood up to them. She'd spoken her truth. And she'd been heard. For years, she'd been assured it was simply a piece of paper. But in that courtroom, the law itself said otherwise. That paper was worth a great deal more than she'd ever been made to think. It was a contract, and when that contract was violated, justice required a cost. So what do you guys think, crew? Does this bomb speculative theory hold water when you string all the clues we've witnessed throughout the years together? Is this courtroom thriller the hidden, untold tale behind the Browns' downfall? This is not so much about polygamy or jealousy or a fractured marriage. It recontextualizes Meri as not a bitter ex-wife, but as the victim of an extended, systematic betrayal. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave your comments below. What supporting evidence from the show makes this theory work? What do you believe? Doesn't quite fit? This is a long way from over. Thanks for hanging with me on this in-depth exploration. If this got you as hooked as it got me, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss the next analysis. Until then, stay vigilant and stay curious.